Have you ever just looked at a massive mountain range and thought, how in the world did that get there? Or maybe you felt a tremor and wondered, what's actually happening? Well, the surface of our planet is anything but static. It's this dynamic stage where an incredible story of creation and destruction is playing out all the time. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of our planet and read that story, a story written in stone. Okay, so let's get right into the central mystery. Why isn't the Earth just some smooth, boring ball? What incredible forces are out there, powerful enough to shove up the Himalayas, or carve out the Mariana Trench, or shake entire cities to their foundations? Turns out the answers aren't on the surface. They're hidden deep, deep inside the planet itself. To really get what's happening on the crust, we have to take a journey down to the core. Seriously, think of the Earth's interior as this colossal engine. And the heat it generates, that's the fuel that drives almost everything we see and feel right here on the surface. The ground beneath our feet feels solid, right? Well, that solid outer shell is called the lithosphere. But here's the most important part. It's not one single unbroken piece like an eggshell. It's more like a cracked eggshell, fractured into these enormous rigid pieces we call tectonic plates. And these plates, well, they're always on the move. So let's peel back these layers. We're living on the crust, which, believe it or not, is incredibly thin compared to everything else. Below that, you've got the mantle, this huge zone of hot, semi-molten rock. Now, the upper part of this mantle is a bit weaker, more fluid, and we call it the asthenosphere. You can think of it as a kind of slippery, slushy track that our big tectonic plates are gliding on. Go even deeper, and you hit the liquid outer core. And finally, the solid iron inner core, where the pressure is so intense it stays solid even though it's unbelievably hot. So, how does this all fit together? Well, that incredible heat from the core creates these slow churning currents in the semi-fluid mantle. It's a process called convection. Just picture a giant pot of water boiling in slow motion. This movement in the mantle acts like a massive conveyor belt, dragging the rigid plates of the lithosphere along with it. This, right here, is the engine that drives our restless planet. You know, the idea that entire continents could actually move was once considered completely absurd. But a few early geologists, kind of like detectives, started piecing together clues from all over the world that pointed to a past where the Earth looked very, very different. And this is the clue that started it all. Back in 1912, a scientist named Alfred Wegener was just looking at a world map and was hit by something so simple yet so profound. The coastline of South America seemed to slot perfectly against the coastline of Africa, just like two pieces of a giant jigsaw puzzle. A coincidence? Wegener didn't think so. Now, what's really fascinating here is that Wegener went way beyond just the shapes fitting together. He found identical rock formations in Brazil that matched up perfectly with those in West Africa. He found fossils of the same little freshwater reptile, Mesosaurus, in both South Africa and Brazil, and absolutely nowhere else. I mean, how could a small reptile possibly cross the entire Atlantic Ocean? And get this, he even found evidence of ancient glaciers in places that are now scorching hot tropics. The only explanation that made any sense was that these places were once all connected. This timeline really just lays out Wegener's whole idea perfectly. He proposed that about 225 million years ago, all the continents we know were squished together into one giant supercontinent he called Pangaea. Then, over millions and millions of years, that landmass started to crack and the pieces began to drift apart, eventually shuffling themselves into the world we recognize today. Wegener had the what, but he couldn't quite explain the how. That's where the modern theory of plate tectonics comes in. It's the grand unifying idea. It explains that it's not just the continents drifting around on their own, but the massive lithospheric plates they're riding on. And these plates are floating and moving on that slippery asthenosphere below, all driven by that great heat engine in the mantle. So when these gigantic plates move and grind and collide, they don't exactly do it quietly. Their interactions are responsible for the most dramatic acts of creation on our planet. We call these the endogenic forces. They're the builders. You can really think of geology as a story of two opposing forces. You've got the endogenic forces, powered by all that heat inside the Earth, and their job is to build things up. They make mountains, volcanoes, new crust. But at the exact same time, you have the exogenic forces, powered by the sun and gravity, working to tear everything back down through erosion. The landscape we see every day is just the result of this constant, epic battle. Let's break down one of the most powerful endogenic events, an earthquake. As plates grind past each other, stress just builds and builds along these cracks called faults. When that stress gets to be too much, the rocks suddenly snap, releasing this massive burst of energy. That starting point, deep underground, is called the focus. The energy zips out as seismic waves, and the spot on the surface directly above the focus, that's the epicenter, and it's where the shaking is the most intense. Volcanoes are another amazing result of plate tectonics. They're basically vents for the molten rock from the mantle to escape, and they come in different flavors depending on the lava. Shield volcanoes, like the ones in Hawaii, are made from thin, runny lava that creates these wide, gentle slopes and pretty calm eruptions. But then you have composite volcanoes. They're built from thick, sticky lava and ash that traps gas, which leads to that classic steep cone shape and much, much more explosive eruptions. Calderas? They are the most violent of all, often collapsing into a huge crater after a massive eruption empties out the magma chamber underneath. Okay, so let's flip to the other side of the story, because no sooner has an endogenic force built a beautiful mountain than the exogenic forces begin their relentless job of tearing it right back down, sculpting and reshaping the land as they go. And these are the primary tools of that destruction, or maybe sculpting. You've got running water and rivers carving out canyons. You've got wind blasting away at rock in the desert. You've got massive glaciers, basically rivers of ice, grinding down entire valleys. And of course, the constant pounding of sea waves, reshaping every coastline. And underneath it all is gravity, always pulling everything downslope. But erosion can't just start hacking away at a solid mountain. It all starts with something called weathering. This is just the process of breaking big rocks into little ones, either physically, like ice freezing and cracking them apart, or chemically, with reactions that dissolve them. Weathering is that crucial first step that gets the material ready to be carried away. Just look at the artistry of a single agent, running water. As a river flows, it literally sculpts the world around it. It creates spectacular waterfalls, lazy, winding meanders across flat plains, and sometimes it even cuts off those loops, leaving behind what we call oxbow lakes. And then, where it finally meets the sea, it drops all the sediment it was carrying, building up new land in the form of a delta. It's a perfect example of how a destructive force can also be incredibly creative. And this kind of sculpting is happening everywhere, all the time. In high mountains, glaciers act like giant bulldozers, carving out those classic U-shaped valleys. In deserts, the wind picks up sand and basically sandblasts the rocks into these incredible shapes, like mushroom rocks. The Earth's surface is really just a perpetual art gallery, and these forces are the artists. So we've met the builders and the destroyers. We've seen the internal engine and the external sculptors. Let's put it all together now and get the big picture of our amazing, dynamic planet. So here's the key takeaway. The Earth is not a finished product. It is a work in progress, constantly existing in this dynamic balance. Internal forces push mountains up, and external forces immediately start wearing them down. In fact, the Himalayas are still growing taller every single year as the Indian plate continues to ram into the Eurasian plate. Our planet truly is a living, breathing, and always changing system. And while these forces are just immensely powerful, they almost always operate on a timescale that's just hard for us to wrap our heads around. On average, tectonic plates move at about 2.5 centimeters per year. That's slower than your fingernails grow. It's just a powerful reminder that the biggest changes on our planet are the result of these slow, relentless processes playing out over millions and millions of years. And all of this brings us to one final, really provocative thought. We've seen the incredible power of water, wind, and ice. But as we move entire mountains for mining, as we build massive dams that alter rivers, as we reshape coastlines for our cities, we have to ask ourselves, have humans become the newest and maybe the most rapid geomorphic force on the planet? What will our chapter in this incredible story, written in stone, actually look like?